a man who never lost sight that the little salesman out there driving in his car and the mother at home doing her family's laundry were the most important people on the earth. Here's to you, Mike. Godspeed, my pal. And I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Colorado.
Mr. President, I rise today to speak about the importance of a landmark piece of legislation, the Clean Air Act. Congress passed the Clean Air Act over 40 years ago with broad bipartisan support from both chambers in Congress, and President Nixon wisely signed it into law. Since then, we've seen remarkable benefits for the health of our nation. We've seen significant reductions in pollution from lead, mercury, sulfur dioxide, and a host of other contaminants. America reduced pollution and made remarkable strides in improving public health, even while our economy adjusted and thrived. In fact, the Clean Air Act has a long and clear track record of promoting job creation and economic growth while reducing pollution. The economic benefits of the Clean Air Act are significant. For every dollar spent on Clean Air Act provisions, we get protections, we get $30 of public health benefits in return. In the year 2010 alone, the Clean Air Act saved 160,000 lives and avoided millions of cases of pollution-related illness, including 1.7 million cases of asthma exacerbation, 130,000 heart attacks, 86,000 emergency room visits, 3.2 million lost school days, and 13 million lost work days. Mr. President, this is a profoundly important law. It protects every single American from the types of pollution that can cause asthma attacks, lost school days for young children, emergency room visits, heart attacks, strokes, and even premature deaths. The House of Representatives recently passed a continuing resolution for the remainder of the fiscal year that would make truly draconian cuts to Clean Air Act funding and authority. These policy riders do not belong in the 7-month budget, and I'm glad the Senate recently voted that legislation down. Upon passage of the House bill, the American Lung Association, which is the leading organization working to save American lives from the ravages of lung disease, said, the House of Representatives also adopted amendments that would block implementation of the Clean Air Act and its life-saving protections. These provisions and others adopted by the House would result in millions of Americans, including children, seniors, and people with chronic disease such as asthma, being forced to breathe air that is unhealthy. Breathing air pollution can cause asthma attacks, heart attacks, strokes, cancer, and shorten lives. Mr. President, that's coming from one of the most respected public health organizations in the world, telling us that this weakening of the Clean Air Act would have dire public health consequences, that more Americans will get sick from toxic pollution. We can be and we should be flexible and listen to the industries affected by the law, but we can't undermine its purpose. Legitimate concerns about regulation should be addressed so we can prosper and grow jobs here in the United States of America. It's important that the Clean Air Act be enforced in a common-sense manner that is workable for American businesses. But we cannot abandon its core charges to preserve public health and ensure the cleanliness of the air that we breathe. I know there's often a tension between the EPA, the regulated community, and stakeholders seeking to navigate the Clean Air Act, and there probably always will be. Our economy functions best and in a way that's best for our citizens when we seek a robust Clean Air Act and are responsive to the needs of our economy. An example of this working well is recent praise that the administration received from the CEO of a leading energy company, who said, quote, when I look at what EPA has done so far, it's actually been pretty moderate. When the same CEO was asked whether Congress should delay the administration's work to protect public health for 2 years, he said, quote, that's just 2 more years of uncertainty, where I think a lot of the investment will remain on the sideline in our industry. Instead of being invested in technology we know how to build here in America. I don't support delay for those reasons. Mr. President, I support continued implementation of the Clean Air Act and will oppose efforts to undermine this important law. For my part, the decision is very simple. We should let doctors and scientists dictate our public health policy instead of politicians. And I hope my friends on both sides of the aisle will come to this same conclusion as well and vote against efforts to weaken the Clean Air Act. For more than 40 years, we've seen that protecting the air we breathe does not have to come at a cost to the nation's economy. Both can improve, both must improve, hand in hand. To close, I'd just like to reiterate that the Clean Air Act has been successful, reducing levels of dozens of dangerous air pollutants and protecting the health of millions of Americans, all while our economy grew. This is a landmark law that has had strong bipartisan support for decades. The Senate shouldn't weaken it. Mr. President, I yield the floor. Mr. President, I'd suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Senator from Illinois.
Ask consent the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
And I ask consent to speak as if in morning business.
Senate said morning business.
Mr. President, I've been around Congress a few years, and when I served in the House of Representatives 16 years ago, the Republicans won control of Congress for the first time in 40 years. They promised to change how business was done in Washington, and they elected Newt Gingrich of Georgia as Speaker of the House. On his first day on the job, Speaker Gingrich addressed a black-tie dinner of happy supporters and took aim at an enemy that he said was undermining America's values. That enemy was Big Bird. Newt Gingrich denounced public broadcasting as a sandbox for the rich, and he condemned it for, quote, eating taxpayers' money. He went on to say, they are simply enclaves of the left, using your money to propagandize your children against your values. Once the Gingrich Republican revolutionaries finished passing their so-called contract with America, Gingrich vowed he would do everything in his power to do away with the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, National Public Radio, and the public broadcasting stations. Fortunately, in the Republican and Democratic parties, cooler heads prevailed. Big Bird was spared. Well, to borrow a line from former President Reagan, here we go again. When we should be talking about the serious budget deficit affecting America, the House Republican budget spent too much time resurrecting the old bumper stickers of the past. They went to America's bumper sticker museum and said, well, let's see if there's some oldies but goodies here. And they loaded up the Republican budget bill with a lot of old issues. And they went back, and some of them fondly went back to the day when Newt Gingrich went after Big Bird. 16 years after Newt Gingrich, this new band of Republicans in the House are once again denouncing public broadcasting as a hotbed of subversive values, and they vowed to pull the plug. You may remember, Mr. President, our friends across the aisle actually tried to end funding for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting last November during the lame duck session. That time, their rallying cry was outrage over NPR's firing of commentator Juan Williams. Now there's a new defunding effort underway and a new source of outrage. James O'Keefe, a right-wing activist with a video camera and a conservative agenda, released video last week which he claims proves that National Public Radio is a biased liberal news organization that needs no federal funding. In the video, two allies of Mr. O'Keefe pretend to be members of a Muslim education group who are considering making a large donation, they said, to NPR. Then they secretly recorded their meeting with two NPR executives. Now, if the name James O'Keefe rings a bell with members of the United States Senate, it should. Remember some of the other things that he was caught doing? It was James O'Keefe and his colleagues who posed as telephone repairmen and tried to lie their way into the office of our colleague, Senator Mary Landrieu of Louisiana. They were going to try to make one of their gotcha videos there, but they went too far. In fact, at the end of it, Mr. O'Keefe pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor of entering federal property under false pretenses. Federal judge sentenced Mr. O'Keefe to 3 years of probation, a fine of $1,500, and 100 hours of community service. The same Mr. O'Keefe in 2009 posed as, with some of his friends, as a pimp and prostitute to secretly film a discussion with staffers of the grassroots anti-poverty group ACORN. Their video of that meeting was so inflammatory that Congress vowed to eliminate all federal funding for that group. I cannot tell you, Mr. President, how many amendments we had on the floor of the Senate in the midst of all the problems we were facing in the country and around the world focused on ACORN. 3 separate investigations, incidentally, later cleared ACORN of any wrongdoing. A report by the Congressional Research Service found that Mr. O'Keefe's undercover videotaping may have broken laws both in California and Maryland. Mr. O'Keefe obviously is not too concerned about breaking a law if he thinks he's going to come up with a sensational video. He was convicted in Louisiana, as I mentioned earlier. The New York Daily News, not exactly a liberal news organization, concluded, quote, when it came to the ACORN incident, they'd edited the tape to meet their agenda. As California's then Attorney General Jerry Brown said after they investigated the Acorn video, quote, "Things are not always as partisan zealots portray them through highly selective editing of reality. Sometimes a fuller truth is found on the cutting room floor." Mr. O'Keefe appears to be engaged in creative editing again, and this time his target is National Public Radio. That's not just my opinion. The website of none other than Fox News' own Glenn Beck, that's right, Glenn Beck, compares the edited and unedited versions of Mr. O'Keefe's latest video and concludes that the edited version appears to be deceptively edited in order to portray statements by one of the secretly recorded NPR execs out of context. An example, on the video, Ron Schiller, who was then in charge of fundraising for NPR and has since been terminated, is heard to say, and I quote, "It's very clear that we would be better off in the long run without federal funding," end of quote. I've heard that repeated over and over again, that this NPR fundraising executive said we'd be better off if we didn't have federal funding. The far right has seized on this statement as proof that NPR doesn't need it and shouldn't get it. Here's the part that ended up on the cutting room floor. Schiller explained, when they look at the full transcript, that, quote, "most philanthropists," close quote, think NPR is almost fully funded by the government, which prevents many of them from donating. And he also said that if NPR lost all federal funding now, quote, "we'd have a lot of stations go dark." Mr. President, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting supports nearly 1,300 local radio and TV stations in communities all across America, in Illinois, and I'll bet in West Virginia. Direct support for those stations makes up nearly 75 cents out of every dollar they spend. I know, because you turn them on, you listen for the news, and they're begging for money. And you send them a check and think, I hope they'll leave us alone for a little while now. 170 million Americans use public broadcasting services every month. That's more than half of the population of America. In my state of Illinois, 1 million people listen to our 14 public radio stations, and 3 million people rely on our 8 public television stations. All told, funding for public broadcasting works out to about $1.35 per American per year. 11 cents a month? I'd say that's a bargain. It's a fraction of what people would pay to get good information. Eliminating federal funding for Corporation for Public Broadcasting is going to force many smaller stations to close if the House Republicans have their way. The first ones hit West Virginia, rural areas of Illinois, small-town America. They'll be the ones to lose the service first. Rural communities will be really hard hit as they rely more than big stations in big cities on federal funding. Cutting all funding for public broadcasting, does anybody seriously believe that's going to affect the deficit? But it would be a great loss to tens of millions of Americans who rely on public broadcasting for quality entertainment and honest, in-depth news coverage. With the momentous change occurring in the world and the major challenges facing our nation, it's essential that we maintain the integrity and viability of public broadcasting. There's nothing in commercial broadcasting that can replace it. Now, some of our conservative friends, and one of them came up to me on a plane when I was heading home to Chicago this last weekend, say they don't object so much to the content of public broadcasting. They just object philosophically to the whole idea of taxpayers' money being spent to subsidize radio and TV. They say, well, let them go on a free market. If they can survive, fine, and if they can't, so be it. Here's what they ignore. Fox, NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, virtually all of the major network stations and other commercial broadcasters receive billions of dollars each year in public subsidies. How? In the form of free use of the public TV spectrum. Mr. President, these stations don't own the airwaves. The American people own the airwaves. And we give them licenses to use our airwaves, America's airwaves, to make their profits. The New America Foundation estimated the total value of the TV spectrum used by commercial TV stations at nearly $5.5 billion a year. And that doesn't count the additional tens of millions of dollars that commercial TV stations make selling political ads every campaign season. Sound familiar? We've all been there, writing checks to these commercial TV stations to put on our ads so we could run for office and preserve the right of that TV station to use the public airwaves free. The public subsidies to commercial stations dwarf what we spend on public broadcasting. Now, I admire the reporting on NPR, but I'm a progressive Democrat. Many conservatives admire that reporting. David Brooks is a conservative I really respect. He writes for the New York Times, and I look forward to his column. Even when I disagree with him, I know it's a thoughtful analysis of the challenges we face. Listen to what he said. He said, I think NPR has done a good job over the last 10 years of reducing bias. I thought it was really biased 10 years ago, Brooks says, but now I think it's pretty straight. And the federal money for NPR doesn't so much go for the big stations. It goes so they can go out to the rural parts of America, which wouldn't have those stations otherwise. David Brooks, you're right. And if the Republicans have their way in the House, the losers are going to be a lot of red states and red parts of America who ought to hear both sides of the story, as I believe all Americans should. Tony Blankley, I remember, used to be an aide to then-Speaker Gingrich. He works for Fox News and NPR. And he said, and I quote, I've been on NPR regularly for a long time. From a personal perspective, they've always given me plenty of access. I'm clearly a right-wing commentator, Tony Blankley said, so I can't complain. There's a conservative on, then there's a liberal on, so that's all fair. Tony Blankley. He added, no editor or host has ever suggested, could you not be quite so conservative on NPR? I have been open and free to express my opinion. The list goes on. I won't read all of them. I'll put them in the record. But the point I want to make is this, Mr. President. At a time in America when we value our government, when we applaud freedom, when we preach it to the world, when we beg authoritarian regimes to give their people a chance to hear both sides of the story, when we say that our Bill of Rights, when it comes to free speech and free press, should be a guidepost for the world, can we really be in the business of shutting down this opportunity for Americans every single day to hear both sides of the story when it comes to the big issues? I don't think that what was done in the House is about money. I think it's about a political philosophy. Many of them think they just want to shut down NPR because they're offended by some things that are said. Well, let me say from my side of the spectrum, I've been offended the other way. I thought they went too far the other way. But isn't that what it's all about? They give you both sides. Make up your own mind. And that's the way it should be. We've seen what can happen when people rush to judgment after seeing selectively edited and sometimes deceptively edited videos. Shirley Sherrod was fired from her job at the Ag Department and painted unfairly as a bigot when she was, in fact, making a passionate plea for racial tolerance. Her comments were knowingly distorted in a video produced by a man who has in the past supported Mr. O'Keefe. Congress voted to cut off federal funding for ACORN before there was any objective investigation into Mr. O'Keefe's damaging video about them. Later investigation showed there was no criminal wrongdoing. Let's not make the same mistake again. Let's not be duped by deceptively edited videos at a time when America needs objective reporting, informative programming that public radio and public television provide. Mr. President, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President.
The senator from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the quorum call.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to speak if in morning business for 10 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Earlier today in Columbus, Ohio, state capital of my great state, I was at the Ohio State University's Fisher College of Business. We talked by phone with Undersecretary Francisco Sanchez, who is one of the leaders at the Department of Commerce, on how to grow exports in this country. The President has charged the Congress, our businesses, encouraged all of us to find ways to double exports as a major path to economic growth, especially to grow manufacturing in our country. We know that for the last several months we've seen manufacturing growth, albeit too small, but manufacturing growth in this country. That's especially important in Ohio. My state is the third leading manufacturing state in the country, behind only California and Texas, states which are 3 and 2 times our size in population. Yet Ohio is kept pace with doing relatively well in manufacturing, but we know what's happened to manufacturing in our country in the last 30 years. Only 30 years ago, manufacturing was more than a quarter of our GDP. Financial services was about 10 or 11% of GDP. In these 30 years, that position's almost flipped, that financial services is over a quarter of our GDP. Manufacturing is only 10 or 11 or 12%. That's why the President, with his push on exporting, is so important. Not that we only export manufacturing goods. Of course, we export services, as we should, but clearly manufacturing is a major component of that. I sit on the President's advisory council, export advisory council, with leaders in the administration and some of America's CEOs of some of America's largest companies and many successful mid-size and small companies in this country. We had a meeting last Friday with Secretary Locke, Undersecretary Sanchez, Secretary Clinton, Secretary of State Clinton, Jim McNerney, CEO of Boeing, Ursula Burns, the CEO of Xerox, Al Mulally, the CEO of Ford, as part of the President's Export Council. In Ohio, as a result, I have put together an Export Advisory Council. We met today in Columbus. That was what our meeting was about, to talk about ideas. So we heard from Albert Green of Kent Displays, William Dawson of Nextech Materials, Philip Irwin of Amatech Solid State Controls, Randall Williamson of Command Alcon, Inc., Mark Friedman of National Biological Corporation, Arlinda Vaughn from Volk Optical, and Ken Hagan from Fospel. All of them raised concerns directly to the Undersecretary of Commerce and directly to me, concerns about corruption in Russia, concerns about tariffs in Brazil, concerns that we all face and all of our companies face in breaking into the Chinese market, and many other concerns about everything from medical devices to export of services and all of that. So the meeting was important, as it will, in fact, and I mentioned one other, Susan Helper, the head of the economics department at Case Western, had particularly good thoughts about how we grow manufacturing in this country. We know that most jobs are created by medium and small businesses. We also know that fewer than 1% of American companies actually export, even as close to Canada or to Mexico. Only 1% of our businesses export, so we know we have to do much more. In Germany, for instance, 20% of their GDP, 20% of their workforce is in manufacturing. They have a trade surplus in manufacturing, and they have a trade surplus with the rest of the world, while we have a huge, almost insidious trade deficit. And Germany has done some pretty interesting things in encouraging manufacturing. We have, as many people point out, we have not really had in our country a manufacturing policy. I spoke with Pat Russo tonight, who's the former CEO of Lucent Technologies, and she sits on the General Motors board, and a couple other people from the GM board I spoke to talk about the fact we don't have a manufacturing policy in this country, and that's why we're seeing other countries begin to do much better in manufacturing, while we have by and large, drifted in our policies and our strategies on manufacturing. There are several things that came out of this meeting that we need to do. We need to pay particular attention on economic development assistance and creating economic development partnerships and business incubators. We need to pay special attention to help those companies get access to capital. It's been a vital roadblock, as the presiding officer from Oregon has been involved, a roadblock to our full economic recovery. We need to look at R&D tax credits. A part of a national manufacturing policy should be increases in R&D tax credits, including making 48C a part of the code that encourages conservation, encourages more efficiencies in energy production and in energy use, making 48C permanent. It means workforce training. Our Sectors Act, which matches up what local businesses and labor unions and community colleges and workforce investment boards do, to retrain workers so they find jobs after that training. That's why we're doing at the end of the month our 4th annual Ohio College Presidents Conference, where I invite in some 55, 60 college presidents. We've done it for the last 3 years since my 2nd year in the Senate, to talk about these issues. How do we encourage people to become engineers? How do we help with access to college, particularly in light of the fact that Republicans are trying to cut Pell Grants, several $100s per student, sometimes a couple thousand, $3,000 a family, whatever. How we fight back and make sure that students have access to education and to our higher education system, those that choose to go to college. We have a lot of work to do. All of this includes, as I said at the White House the other day with the meeting of the President's Export Council, that while we work on exports, we need to fix our trade agreements. We need to fix our tax policy. We need to make sure those workers who lose their jobs because of trade, and this is so often forgot about by my Republican colleagues, workers who lose their jobs because of trade have to be compensated. They need work. They need to be retrained. They need to keep their health care. And that's why the presiding officer and I and many others have fought for the extension, Senator Casey, especially from Pennsylvania, have fought for the extension of trade adjustment assistance and the health coverage tax credit, 2 long-time federal programs. The TAA, Trade Adjustment Assistance, was started bipartisanly under President Kennedy in 1962. Why those are so important for workers who have lost their jobs through no doing of our own, but because of trade agreements passed, I think wrongfully, wrongheadedly, in this body and the House of Representatives down the hall. Because of trade agreements, they've lost their jobs. We need those workers to have the opportunity to be retrained and to continue to keep their health insurance after they've been laid off, again, through no fault of their own. Our efforts to double exports is extraordinarily important for our economic growth. At the same time, it's important that we're sensitive to those workers who have lost their jobs because of trade policy. We can do this right. We can enforce our trade laws more aggressively, as President Obama has begun to do. We can work on trade agreements. We can fix our trade policy so it actually helps American workers and American consumers, instead of practicing trade policy adopted out of a textbook, an economics textbook that's 20 years out of print. We ought to be adopting a trade policy that's in America's, in our nation's national interest. It's not what we've done in the past. And as we move with President Obama and this Congress towards a manufacturing strategy, and even better than that, a manufacturing policy like most of the rest of the industrial world has, I think we'll all be in a better position to build a middle class in Oregon and Ohio and across the country. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Senator from Ohio.
Unanimous consent to dispense with the quorum call.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent the Judiciary Committee be discharged from further consideration of S-Res 100 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 100 designating March 11th, 2011 as World Plumbing Day.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection, the committee is discharged and the Senate will proceed.
Mr. President, I further ask the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion to reconsider be laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate, that any statements be printed in the record at the appropriate place.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of S-Res 101, which was introduced earlier today.
The clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 101 expressing the sense of the Senate relating to the March 11th, 2011 earthquake and tsunami in Japan.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection, the Senate will proceed.
Mr. President, I further ask the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion to reconsider be laid upon the table with no intervening action and debate, and that any statements relating to the resolution be printed in the record at the appropriate place.
Without objection.
President, I ask unanimous consent the following senators be recognized at the times listed below as if in morning business for the purpose of giving their maiden speech to the Senate. Senator Portman from my state, following the maiden speech of Senator Coates on Tuesday, March 15th for up to 15 minutes, and Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut at 12 noon Wednesday, March 16th for up to 20 minutes.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it adjourn until 10 a.m. on Tuesday, March 15th. Following the prayer and pledge, the journal of proceedings be approved to date, the morning hour be deemed expired, the time for the two leaders be reserved for their use later in the day, and following any leader remarks there be a period of morning business until 11 a.m. with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each, with the time equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or their designees, with majority controlling the first half and the Republican leader controlling the second half. Further, that 11 a.m. the Senate proceeded to the consideration of S-493, the Small Business Reauthorization Bill. And finally, Mr. President, I ask the Senate recess from 12:30 until 2:15 to allow for the weekly caucus meetings.
Without objection.
Mr. President, tomorrow at 2:15, Senator Coates will be recognized to speak for up to 30 minutes to deliver his maiden speech to the Senate. And following his statement, Senator Portman will be recognized to speak for up to 15 minutes to deliver his maiden speech. Roll call votes in relation to amendments to the Small Business Jobs Bill are possible throughout the day tomorrow. Mr. President, if there's no further business come before the Senate, I ask that it adjourn under the previous order.
Senate stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.
So the Senate has gavelled out, but before leaving, members voted to move forward with a small business and technology bill. That legislation continues two programs for small